Dr. Pavitra Bharadwaj. I am Associate Professor in Jesus and Mary College, University of Delhi. So friends, as you are following the lectures in this series, you would be appreciating the content being given here. And this series is particularly about web programming. And you are following the lectures, so you would know that we have talked about front-end web development in the past few lectures here, where we have talked about the basic HTML, and then we have moved on to the advanced CSS and HTML5 elements which you can use to create robust web pages. So far we have only been talking about the static element of the web pages, that is the element which is not going to change when there is any interaction with the user. Now in today's lecture we are going to talk about the next step, or we are going to take the next leap forward, and we are going to talk about how we can add more dynamism to our web pages. That is how we can create more interactive web pages which will be able to work, or which will be able to interact with the user, which will allow more customization to the website according to the user's choices, according to the user's opinions. So for this, you can use different tools, and one of the very common and popular tools which is used is the scripting languages or scripting, right. So we will be focusing on scripting in general, but particular syntax we will be taking about will be of JavaScript. So we will talk about how we can incorporate JavaScript in our HTML pages, in our web pages, and we can add more robustness, add more dynamism, add more event driven programming in our web pages to make them more dynamic, to make them more interactive, to make them more live. So basically, if we look at how dynamic web pages work, so basically we have seen that two types of technologies are used at the client side and the server side. So at the client side we use the HTML for the basic creation of the web pages, and then we use some kind of scripting, like we will be using JavaScript here. At the server side also we can use scripting, it is also used there, and besides scripting we use other tools for server side programming like the PHP. So these are the two tools which are used for creating dynamic web pages. If your web pages are static web pages, that is those are non-interactive web pages which are not going to change due to users interaction, then there is no need to put scripting, we simply use the HTML. However, nowadays we don't see any web pages which are not created using a little bit of dynamism, otherwise the page becomes very dead and it becomes very boring for the viewer. So basically these scripting can be used at the client's end as well as at the server's end. So for this particular context we are going to look at scripting which is running at the client's end, which is running at the browser. So if we talk about languages or computer programming languages, so we can divide the programming languages, or we can distribute them or categorize the web languages based on different parameters or different attributes of the languages. For example, we have high level languages and low level languages. So we know that low level languages are more close to the machine languages, or which are directly understandable by the machine. So machine language is an example of a low level language, whereas the language which use English or English like phrases, these are known as high level languages, because those languages which you are using English or English like phrases for programming or for giving commands to the computer, they need to be translated into a low level language. So basically the machine only understands the low level or the machine language. So if you are writing or if you are giving commands to the machine in a high level language, then you will of course have to use a translator which will convert or which will translate your high level language into machine language. So what are these translators? So for this we have two types of translators which are commonly used. One is known as the compiler. So we have certain languages which are compiled languages like C and C++. These are compiled languages where you write or you type the complete program, and then you compile it, or you convert it, or you translate it into machine language in one single go. Or otherwise you can also have interpreted language like Python. So interpreted languages are those where the translation is happening line by line. So after the user presses enter, by after keying in the particular line or instruction, the command is checked and you can type the next line only when your first line is error free. So those languages are called as interpreted languages. Then we have one category of language which is structured language, and another category which are object oriented languages. So structured languages are the languages in which we use programming constructs like modules and functions for coding, whereas in object oriented programming like C++ or Java or Python, we use the object as the code. So data is stored about an object, and every object is having its functions or its methods using which it can change the values of the attribute of the object. So here object is the central entity in the program and not the data, whereas in structured programming data is the central entity. And then of course we have the scripting languages and programming languages. So it's very common and very easy to be confused between Java and JavaScript. So it's very important that we understand what is a scripting language and what is a programming language, right? So we need to know the difference between Java as a scripting language, that is JavaScript, and Java as a programming language. So there are few attributes, or there are few features of scripting languages which we understand, which we can use, and which we know that will differentiate it from a programming language, right? So any scripting language, whether we talk about JavaScript or we talk about any other script, VB script, etc. So here we use certain programming language tools and we make them easier to use. So it is all scripting languages, they have got lesser number of features, they are less versatile than the programming language. Of course scripting language can be used both at the client side as well as the server side, but when you are using a scripting language at the server side, it needs to be invoked from the browser. It needs to run on the server, but it is invoked from the browser, whereas when you are using the script at the client's end, then you invoke and run it on the browser only, right? So this is the difference between client side scripting and server side scripting. Server side script runs on the server, whereas client side script will run on the browser. So if we talk about JavaScript, so of course JavaScript is also a very important, very popular and very commonly used scripting language, which is used for client side scripting mostly. So it actually enhances the functionality and the appearance of the web page. So it makes the page, as already stated, it will make the page more dynamic, it will make the page more interactive. And also because we have already discussed the concept of interpreted and compiled language, so it's important to know that JavaScript is an interpreted language, that is the translation of the program or the running of the program, execution of the program will be line by line. After you type one line, then you go on to the next line and that is translated. So in JavaScript what happens is that when you are doing a client side, so we said that client side script will run on the browser and it is invoked by the browser. So therefore it is understood that there is no need to contact the server, there is no immediate response which you need to contact the server. And also we can use JavaScript to provide a great deal of customization for the user's input based on the user's input. So we can do a lot of implicit customization and we can do a lot of explicit customization. Now what is implicit and explicit customization? See, implicit input means that when the user logs in or when the user opens the website, we have some kind of changes, or we change the look and feel of the web page depending on the role of the user which is being specified. Explicit means, say for example, certain websites they allow us to change the background image or they allow us to change the theme of the website. So that is called explicit input based customization, that is user is specifying the theme according to which the website will be changed or it will be customized. So that is called explicit input based customization. So for browser, so for running the JavaScript, you don't need to install any other software, it automatically it runs in the browser. So most of the browsers, the latest versions of most of the browsers, they have a built-in JavaScript interpreter. So directly your JavaScript program can run on the browser. And also because we have discussed the concept of object oriented, so we need to understand that JavaScript is not an object oriented language, but we say that JavaScript is an object based language. Now why are we saying that it is object based? Because there are some features of object orientation which JavaScript does not support, that we are going to see. So there are some particular pillars which we need to identify as for the basis for object orientation. So since JavaScript does not support that, so we say that it is object based, because the basic premise or the basic unit of program or the basic unit of execution here also is the object. But certain qualities of object orientation, certain attributes of object orientation are not supported by JavaScript. So we say that it is an object based language and not an object oriented language. Now very commonly this can be asked, or it comes to one's mind, that what is the difference between Java and JavaScript. So we need to understand that Java is actually a programming language. It is a full-fledged programming language which is used for creating interactive graphics. Okay, it can be used for creating independent commercial applications, that is it can be used for creating softwares. It can also be used for creating web browser based applications. So Java has got much wider application than simply JavaScript. But very important to notice that an application written in JavaScript or an application written in Java, it has got its stand-alone status. That is, a program which you write using Java will run on its own, which can run independently, right? But whereas if you look at JavaScript, then the program which is created in JavaScript, it always runs within the context of the browser. The program of JavaScript has to fit into another HTML program. It is not a standalone entity. JavaScript will always be a part of the HTML page. It cannot run on its own. So basic purpose of JavaScript is to customize the pages based on the browser version, to give a visual feedback to the user actions, and to validate the data on which is entered on the HTML form. So these are very simple purposes, very simple applications for which JavaScript is used. Whereas if you look at Java, Java is a very comprehensive, very robust programming language which can be used for creating different types of applications, ranging from web based application to commercial based software application. So we just said that JavaScript, it's very important to note that why are we saying that JavaScript is not object oriented but it is object based, because to qualify as object oriented, the programming language should support for data abstraction, data encapsulation, data protection and inheritance. These are the four main features of object orientation which any programming language should support in order to qualify as an object oriented programming language. However, JavaScript does not support data abstraction and inheritance, right? So it does not support, you cannot create classes like you create classes in your other object oriented languages like C++. Okay, and therefore it treats, although it treats all the elements of a web page as an object, but still we say that it is object based language. The reason being that you cannot create classes, user defined classes cannot be created using JavaScript, which can be done using other fully object oriented languages. Therefore JavaScript is a object based language, not an object oriented language. So since we are saying that JavaScript is based on objects, that is all data is represented in the form of objects. So what is actually an object in a JavaScript? So object we can consider as an entity which is used for storing information, which has got certain properties, okay, and these properties can be accessed, they can be used, they can be changed, right, for processing or by the programmer. So these objects, they are units of data, they are storage units of data which will hold certain properties, and the properties can be changed with the help of certain methods which will also belong to the object. So in JavaScript basically there are three types of objects that we talk about. First object are the native objects. Native objects means these objects are defined by the script itself, by JavaScript itself. So we have string, we have number, array, image, date, math. These are known as the native JavaScript object which are defined by the environment itself. Then we also have another category of objects which are known as host objects, which are supplied and always available to JavaScript by the browser environment. And the third category are the user defined objects, that is which can be defined by the author or which can be defined by the programmer. So we have native objects like all the different data types. We have host objects like you have window, you have document, you have forms, whatever appears on the browser, and then certain objects can be created by the user or the programmer. So those are known as user defined objects. So first category of objects are called the host objects. Host object means the objects which are defined by the JavaScript, right. So JavaScript basically is used, it is based on a model which is known as document object model. So here what is document object model? That is all the objects on the document, they are part of a hierarchy, right. So manipulating the document object model is one way to create dynamic web content. So if you change the object model, you can create more dynamism in your content. So every web browser can have its own version of the document object model, that is how the hierarchy is implemented, and this therefore it's difficult for the programmer to create this kind of script, because depending on the browser the hierarchy may change. So we need to devise mechanisms so that our web page will open similarly on all different browsers. So if you look at the document object model here, you can see that we have a series of objects and one object is a part of another object. So we can see that we have the window object, within the window we have history, location, document object, and within the document we have other objects like the link or the anchor, and one inside the other you have objects. So this hierarchical model of web browser is created using the document object model, right. So there are standards for the document object model which are given by the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium. So that defines what the browser needs to create or what the browser needs to provide in the form of the document object model, so that the entire model becomes more standardized and programmers need not worry about how the model is going to be implemented in the different browsers. So efforts are being made towards standardization of the document object model. So if we look at this shows us the hierarchy of different objects. So we can see that the window object is at the top of the hierarchy. Now within the window object there can be multiple objects like the frame, document, location and history. Then the document object can further have different objects like layer, link, image, anchor and form, right, all the different HTML objects which we see. And then again the form object, for example, can have multiple other objects like text box, radio, checkbox, button, etc. And within these also we can have objects like the select can have an object called option. So this is a hierarchy of objects which is created if you are following the document object model of the browser or of the JavaScript. So the objects, they have got a certain set properties, they are known as the characteristics of the object, and these characteristics will make the object unique within a group. So some properties, as we know, are common to many objects, while there are some which are more specifics, right. For example, the property name. So for all objects this is a common property called name, but there can be specific properties which are only applicable to certain objects. Like for example, in the object checkbox you have a property called checked. So that is a property which is unique only to a checkbox and a radio button. So certain properties are common to different objects, certain properties are specific to particular objects. Then we have variables which store information related to certain objects. What is a variable? A variable basically you can say is a container space in the memory where some value is going to be stored. So how do you access a particular object? So you have to use the syntax where you write the object name, period, and the property name. Say for example, the name of the object is document and the property you want to access is the background color. So you will write document.bg color. Again, it is very important that JavaScript is case sensitive, okay, and the names of the properties are defined by the environment. So you have to use the proper case for all the properties that you are using in JavaScript. Unlike HTML, JavaScript is not case insensitive, it is definitely case sensitive. So when you have an object has got certain data and the object also has got some methods or what we call as special functions, right. So the methods, they execute some specific operation related to the object. So methods can be used, basically methods are used for changing the value of the object property. For example, you have an object window and which has got a method called alert method. So if you want to write something on the window on the document, so you will use the alert method. So the syntax is similar to the syntax that we use for the object and the attribute. Here you will write object name, period, the method name, and because this is a function or this is a method, so therefore you will have to pass certain arguments. There are some methods in which arguments are essential, there are other methods in which argument may not be passed. So you can have an object like the window object and one of the methods of the window object is the alert method. There can be another example like the document object. So document object has got another method called the write method. So in the write method you will of course have to give within the parenthesis you will specify the arguments or what you want to write on the document. So this is the syntax that you follow, object name dot method name or object name dot property name. So it is very important to understand that methods are used for changing the value of an object property. You cannot alter the value of the particular object's property unless you are using a method or you are using a function. Then we have got events. Now when a user, because we are saying that in JavaScript we are trying to create more interactive web pages, that is the user is going to interact with the web page and the web page is going to give a feedback to the user's interaction. So in JavaScript this ability, this is known as event driven programming. So what is an event? An event will occur when a user is interacting with the web page, right. So any event is action which is occurring on the page due to the interaction of the user. For example, when a user is clicking a button, that is an event. When a user is clicking the mouse or rolling the mouse over an image, that is also an event. So likewise, JavaScript provides a good range of event driven functionality, and that is the main power which JavaScript gets when it is helping us to build interactive web pages. So we will be continuing with our discussion on JavaScript in the next lecture. Please keep watching CEC. Thank you.